The knock came at exactly 12:07 a.m. Soft at first, almost polite. Then again, a little firmer, like someone unsure whether they should even be there. I remember freezing in place, the spoon still in my hand, hovering above a chipped mug of instant coffee that had already gone cold. No one ever knocked on my door that late, not in that quiet part of Cedar Falls, Iowa, where nights felt heavier than silence itself. For a moment, I considered ignoring it. But something about that second knock. It wasn't demanding. It wasn't desperate either. It felt uncertain, like whoever stood outside wasn't sure they deserved an answer. And that's what made me walk to the door. Before we go any further, if you believe in kindness, in second chances, and in the quiet moments that change lives forever, take a second right now to like this video, leave a comment, share it with someone who needs hope, and subscribe to the channel. Stories like this deserve to be felt together. When I opened the door, the cold night air slipped in first, followed by her. Her name, I would later learn, was Clara. But in that moment, all I saw was a woman in her late 20s, standing under the flickering porch light, wrapped in a thin gray sweater that clearly wasn't enough for the biting December wind. Her hair was slightly damp, like she'd been walking for a while, and her eyes were the kind that carried stories they didn't want to tell. She didn't look at me right away. Instead, she glanced down at her hands, clasped tightly together, as if holding herself from falling apart. Then, almost in a whisper, she said she was sorry for bothering me so late, and asked if I had any sugar she could borrow. Sugar. At midnight. It didn't make sense. But something about the way she said it, like the word itself didn't matter, made me step aside and let her in without asking questions. I lived alone, had been for years, ever since life had slowly unraveled into something quieter, smaller. My days were predictable, my nights even more so. Work, dinner, silence, repeat. People stop knocking on your door when your life becomes that simple. But there she was, standing in my kitchen now, her eyes scanning the room like she was trying to memorize it, or maybe trying to calm herself. I handed her a small jar of sugar, but she didn't take it immediately. Instead, she wrapped her arms around herself and took a slow breath, like she had finally reached somewhere safe, even if she didn't fully believe it yet. That's when I realized she hadn't come for sugar. Not really. She hadn't even looked at it. Minutes passed in a strange, quiet tension, the kind that feels heavy but not uncomfortable, like two strangers standing on the edge of something they don't understand yet. I asked if she was okay. She nodded, too quickly. And that's when I knew she wasn't. She finally took the sugar from my hand, holding it like it was just a prop in a story she didn't want to tell. Her fingers trembled slightly, and when she finally looked up at me, there was something raw in her expression. Not fear, not sadness alone, but exhaustion. The kind that doesn't come from lack of sleep, but from carrying too much for too long. She told me she had just moved into the neighborhood a week ago, the house 2 doors down, the one with the broken porch railing and overgrown bushes. I had noticed it being occupied again, but I hadn't thought much of it. People came and went. No one stayed long enough to matter. At least, that's what I had learned to believe. She said she hadn't met anyone yet, hadn't had the chance. Life had been complicated, that word again. Complicated. It's funny how people use that word when the truth feels too heavy to say out loud. I told her she didn't need to explain anything, and for a moment I thought that would be the end of it, that she would take the sugar, thank me, and leave, but instead, she sat down. Right there, at my small kitchen table, like her legs had finally given up pretending to be strong. She didn't cry. Not yet. But her silence said everything. The clock on the wall ticked louder than usual. Outside, the wind brushed against the windows like it was trying to listen in. And then, slowly, she began to speak. Not in a rush. Not dramatically. Just honestly. She told me about leaving a relationship that had taken more than it had given, about nights filled with arguments that never really ended, just paused, about feeling invisible in a place that was supposed to feel like home. She told me how she had packed her things in silence, left without saying goodbye, and drove for hours without knowing exactly where she was going. Until she ended up here, Cedar Falls, a place no one chooses unless they're trying to start over, or disappear. Her voice didn't break when she spoke. But it carried something deeper than tears. It carried truth. And truth has weight. I listened. Not because I had answers, but because sometimes listening is the only thing someone needs. She laughed once, quietly, when she realized how strange it all must have sounded. Showing up at a stranger's door in the middle of the night, asking for sugar as an excuse to not feel alone. But I told her something simple, that she wasn't strange. She was human. And for the first time that night, she looked at me like she believed it. Time moved differently after that. What felt like minutes turned into hours. The coffee was forgotten, the sugar untouched. The night softened around us, like it understood this moment wasn't meant to be rushed. She told me she hadn't slept properly in days. That silence scared her more than noise now. That being alone with her thoughts felt louder than any argument she had left behind. And I understood that more than I expected, because loneliness doesn't always come from being alone. Sometimes it comes from finally hearing everything you've been trying to ignore. Around 2 a.m., her voice grew quieter, not because she had run out of things to say, but because she didn't need to say them anymore. Something had shifted, not dramatically, but enough. I offered her the couch, not out of obligation, but because it felt like the right thing to do. She hesitated. Of course she did. Trust doesn't come easy, especially after it's been broken. But eventually, she nodded. And as she settled into the couch, pulling the blanket around her like it was the first real comfort she'd felt in a long time, I realized something I hadn't felt in years. My home didn't feel empty anymore. That night changed more than I expected. The next morning, sunlight filled the room differently. Warmer somehow, softer. She was still there, not as a stranger anymore, but not quite familiar either. Something in between. She made coffee, real coffee this time, and for the first time since she arrived, she smiled. It wasn't perfect, but it was real. Days turned into weeks after that. She didn't stay permanently, of course. She had her own place, her own life to rebuild. But something connected us. Not romance, not immediately, but understanding. We became steady. She would come by in the evening sometimes, sit at the same table, talk about small things. Work, weather, memories that didn't hurt as much anymore. And slowly, she began to change. Not into someone new, but back into someone she had forgotten. Stronger, softer, whole. And me? I changed too, without realizing it at first. I started leaving the porch light on, just in case, because sometimes people don't come for what they ask. They come for what they need. If this story is touching your heart so far, don't forget to like, comment, and share it with someone who believes in quiet miracles. And subscribe if you want more stories that remind you how powerful simple moments can be. One evening, weeks later, she stood at my door again. Not at midnight this time, but just as the sun was setting. She wasn't holding anything. No excuses, no sugar, just herself, and she looked different. Not because her life had become perfect, but because she had faced it. She told me she was leaving, not running this time, but moving forward. A new job in another city, a fresh start, built on her own terms. And as she stood there, I realized something that surprised me. I wasn't sad, not really, because some people don't come into your life to stay forever. They come to remind you of something you forgot, or to help you become someone you needed to be. Before she left, she smiled again, and this time, it reached her eyes. She said she never needed the sugar, and I told her I knew. She came because she didn't want to be alone, and somehow, neither did I. Now, before we reach the end of this story, I have a small request for you. Comment the word kindness below if you believe one simple act can change someone's life forever. Because it can. I've seen it. That night, at 12:07 a.m., she walked away slowly, not looking back, but she didn't need to. Some stories don't need endings. They just need moments that matter. And that night, it mattered. More than anything. If this story stayed with you, if it made you feel something real, take a moment to like, comment, and share it. Because sometimes, the smallest stories carry the biggest truths. And sometimes, a knock at midnight isn't about sugar at all. It's about finding light when everything else feels dark.